Good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Mike McCormick is with us from the Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil Substack. He's also a former stenographer for Joe Biden for many years. He says he's got new details on how the Bidens set up those Burisma meetings. We'll talk to Mike coming up. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Whales keep dying off the coast of the United States, and it just so happens the reason they're dying is all of these ridiculous, unsightly, and apparently killer windmills that are just off the coast. It's got a lot of local Americans within the eyesight of the dead whales and the windmills concerned, yet it doesn't seem to have any of the traditional environmental groups concerned. They've gone kind of amazingly silent on the issue. Let's bring in Daniel Kish now. He's a senior fellow at the Institute for Energy Research, and he joins us on the phone. Daniel, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Vince.
What is going on with all of these dead whales washing up? What's the explanation here?
Well, the government's telling us that there's nothing going on, but they haven't done any research, and now they're saying we need to do some research, but ultimately the people along the coast will tell you, and I think there are about 20 mayors in coastal towns up and down around New Jersey and other areas that have seen big dead whales on the beach, that
Yes.
Something's wrong, and they're out there sending seismic and laying these things out, and there's a mad rush because the government's pouring billions of dollars into subsidies for this stuff, and so every foreign company out there is lining up because most of these companies are foreign, and it's kind of hard to hide a dead whale.
Yeah, very hard. The timeline here is interesting. If you were looking for an honest answer as to how these whales are dying, you might look at this evidence. In 2016, that's the year when the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said that there were beginning to be unusual mortality events for humpback and North Atlantic right whales, which started, of course, washing up on the shores there near New Jersey, Long Island. That happened to be the same year in which wind development began off of the East Coast. Those two, it seems like it's worth connecting some dots there, no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, since December of last year, 60 whales have washed up on the beaches along the coast. In fact, it's gotten to such a point. Actually, Michael Schellenberger just released a movie called Thrown to the Wind, which addresses this and talks to experts up and down the coast about just exactly what's happening in their backyards. And I it kind of makes me wonder, these are right whales, I think you said.
Yes.
If they were left whales, do you think the Biden administration would be doing something to try to save them?
They'd charge those windmills with a hate crime right away. No, so let me understand something, though. It used to be kind of a staple of the environmental left that you stand up for the whales. How much standing up for the whales are the traditional environmental groups doing right now?
Oh, none. Absolutely none. They're more interested in pushing offshore wind because offshore wind costs 3 times as much to build and to deploy as onshore wind and natural gas plants. So this is very expensive electricity, and even at those rates, some of these companies have canceled and gone back on their contracts and said, we're not going to build this if you're only going to pay us 3 times as much. We want more. There have been cancellations off of Massachusetts, one off of Rhode Island, over in the UK, a huge plant that was scheduled to be deployed over there has been shut down. So what we're talking about, anybody who's ever followed the green movement in the United States kind of recognizes that essentially they understand the capitalist system very well, and what they try to do is make stuff more expensive so we'll use less. And that same thing goes for electricity. And so what we're talking about is very expensive electricity and a bunch of dead whales washing up on the beaches, and they're nowhere to be found.
Nowhere to be found. Yet they used to be. So organizations like the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, Greenpeace, they're all big backers of putting windmills up in the ocean, but they don't have anything these days to say about the whales that seem to be dying as a result of those projects.
Right. I mean, Greenpeace used to attack whaling ships and far-flung parts of the world. That's how they got their name, by ramming whaling ships the Japanese had and all the rest. You don't see them ramming into windmills. Of course, there aren't any windmills. This is very nascent in the United States. We've only got one small offshore wind project so far off of Rhode Island in a very peculiar place. But at any rate, what we're talking about here is a double standard, a double sense of justice when it comes to whales, who get all the attention. And actually, when it comes to oil and gas development, down in the Gulf of Mexico, the Interior Department just pulled back a sail, made it much smaller because they're worried about something called the rice whale down there. But we've got generations of experience and no conclusion ever that whales are affected in the Gulf of Mexico because of oil and gas operations.
Why? So let me just ask you a question about the oil companies now, because you have some of these oil companies are actually the investors in some of these wind projects. What is inducing them in order to put money into this failing, murderous technology?
Yeah, they tend to be foreign companies whose governments in Europe are heavily invested in green energy, and who, for whatever reason, they're destroying their economies over there. Germany's deindustrializing, and other people can't afford to keep their plants open anymore that make things. But that's part of it. The other part is huge amounts of subsidies. I mean, Goldman Sachs says that the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which they now admit is a climate bill,
right,
the Green New Deal in essence, will cost $1.2 trillion, 3 times as much as it was billed at the time when CBO scored it. So, that kind of money is kind of hard to pass up.
For sure. So the summary here is that the whale deaths will probably continue because there's no appetite among these lefty organizations and the media that represents their talking points to discuss what has become a real problem for a number of communities in the Northeast. Yes,
exactly. And they're nowhere to be found. Normally they'd be standing up and screaming at the top of their lungs and lawsuits and you name it.
Yeah.
And instead, they're cheering it on.
Well, that's because they know why this is happening. I mean, that kind of gives it away, doesn't it? If you're not going to speak up for the whales, then that tells me that all of these lefty groups suspect that it is the windmills that are killing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Because they can make money otherwise. They could just be like, look at all the whale death. It's probably climate change. No, they know better. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time today, sir. Daniel Kish.
You betcha. Thanks,
Vince. To you. Daniel's a senior fellow at the Institute for Energy Research. Yeah. And the whales keep dying, and the left doesn't care because they're holding the murder weapon. Phil is in Fredericksburg on line 1. Phil, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, we already know that whales use sonar to travel underwater, and what that does is it lets them move around. But these windmills may have some massive magnetic signatures, and that may be really tearing up how these whales are able to get around underwater.
Sure, that sounds like a good hypothesis, and I suspect that must be the explanation. It's throwing off something about their navigation system. So that's
right,
a whale
exactly.
doesn't want to beach itself. Why does a whale end up on the beach?
And the thing is, look, the windmill's making a signature. It's sending the power in a cable to the land. That's like a huge fence of a very weird electromagnetic signature that the whale goes through. Who's to say that the whale gets so confused? It may affect its nervous system and cause them to stop, being able to surface to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, something crazy is going on here, Phil. But like I said, the silence from these lefty groups kind of tell you the whole story, don't they?
Yeah, well, it's got to stop. We want those whales alive,
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Phil, thank you very much. Phil, good point. It is amazing. Just imagine that being a parent. I don't know if maybe you've experienced this, but like, God forbid, but you bring your child to the beach and then a humpback is just dead and rotting on the beach. That's their first experience with a whale. They see it there. People spend their whole lives waiting to go see the whales, right? They get in a boat and there's a whale. It breached over there, and everyone gets their cameras out. They're so amazed. It is amazing. I've never seen it. I'd love to. I've seen it on video. Never seen it in person. I'm not Chris Plant. I don't know cruises. But I'd like to see a whale breach. Wouldn't that be cool to see one in person? It'd be an amazing thing. And instead, you're traumatizing these poor little kids at the beach. Hey, look, a whale rotting on the beach. Let's take Pete calling in from Vienna, line 2. Pete, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, how you doing? This is a third-grade science experiment. All you got to do is take a tuning fork and put it in a glass of water. And you can see that anything that's making vibrations puts ripples out. There's sonar implications, and it's clearly damaging for these whales. It's just simple common sense. If you put something in the water that vibrates, it's going to go on for miles and miles and miles.
And, in our relationship with nature, Pete, we make, cost-benefit analysis. We make trade-offs. Sometimes it's like, of course you got to set up that power plant there. I don't care that there's a little turtle that lives there. The benefit is going to be so immense, it's worth building that project there. But the wind thing is paying off for who? Nobody. The wind is paying off for nobody except for Biden's friends. They're all getting rich off of it. The rest of us are getting screwed by it. So you get no energy out of it, and it kills the whales. Tell me how this is a good deal.
It makes certain people feel good. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
Right? And now the fact, they're trying to hide the fact they're killing whales, that's something, probably doesn't feel good for all those leftists.
No.
So they're trying to hide it and push it under the rug.
Well, it's typical. Remember, Anthony Fauci was torturing beagles in science experiments, and they yawned at that, too, because it was Fauci. Thank you, Pete. If the Trump family was doing this, we'd have a very different news cycle. Donald Trump Jr. harpooned a whale. Yeah, we wouldn't hear the end of it, would we? Come on, nothing. And if he did harpoon a whale, it would probably be for actual energy. Get some oil out of that thing. Not this crappy wind that does nothing. Kathleen calling in from McLean, line 3. Kathleen, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Afternoon, Vince, and thank you again for bringing this topic up. It's just so tragic, isn't it?
Totally.
Not only the whales are being disoriented or whatever, beached because of the wind turbines, but out in the West, primarily, the big wind farms up on the hills are decimating our raptor bird and migrating bird populations. And apparently something like, and in the East, too, bat populations have been decimated. They come out of their cave and they fly into these wind turbines. And
that's not good. The bat population in particular, the brown bats, are kind of a devastated species right now. A lot of them have been suffering from disease that's been killing off so many of them. You don't see quite as many as you used to as a kid. That's a problem. You don't want to kill the bats off.
I don't see any in the evening when I sit out back and have a glass of Chardonnay with my husband. I don't see any bats anymore. Now, but the other thing too is these solar panel fields of solar panels. A lot of the birds migrating, flying overhead, especially out in the desert. They dive down. They think it's water, and then that again. Now I think they've done something to correct the solar panels, but I don't think they've done anything to correct the wind turbine thing. So we're killing them everywhere, and it's just so heart-rending.
It's a total tragedy.
I want to put a album together, a photo album, and deliver it to AOC and the other Green New Deal people and just say, here, take a look at this. Put this on your coffee table. All these dead whales and dead birds.
No, they avert their gaze. That's kind of the company policy over there. But Kathleen, thank you very much. Good points all around. All right, hold up. I do have more of your calls coming in on this. We're going to talk about it. It is. Let's take a call from Joel in Lovettsville, line 3. Joel, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Oh, my gosh, Vince, you're awesome as usual. So I'm listening. I got to call Greenpeace. And I got to say, hey, what's going on? Well, it was interesting. The first thing I wanted to know is, was I a donor? Did I donate to Greenpeace, which I thought was kind of funny. I said, y'all are out there, always blocking the ships and the oil vessels and stuff like that. I said, what are you doing to block all the windmills? They go, where did you hear your news from? It was the first comment that they made. And the next thing is we've done extensive research on it. And if you look at just a basic thing on the internet, and I just did this, it says it's just cynical disinformation campaign, said Greenpeace Ocean Director John Hosever. It doesn't seem to worry them that it's not based on any kind of evidence. And so they directed me to read
the website.
It's unbelievable. So they're totally denying that any of this with the wells has to do with anything with the windmills, but I'm sure if it with oil travels anywhere near a whale, oh boy, Katie barred the door. But they wanted to know, was I a donator?
Yes, that's right. Well, the retort to that is the wind industry a donor? I mean, come on. Like, you get the idea that you would be anything but corrupt in answering that question, Greenpeace, is ludicrous.
Unbelievable.
Joel, thanks for doing the research. I really appreciate the snap reporting. That's a big help. Thank you, sir. There's Joel in Lovettsville. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call Greenpeace. He called them, and then they lied to him. What a world, huh? What a world. Mike McCormick, now just minutes away. He's got some news of his own about that Biden family and the way they make all their money. Well, good afternoon to you. 5:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. So great to have you with us, as always. Thank you for doing that, spending some time here. You can join us on the phone as well at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. What is going on with the Biden family and all that money that's been flowing into their coffers over the years, the many years in which Biden has been a, quote, public servant? How do they make all that cash? Mike McCormick is a man who's been tracking that question very closely. Mike is the author of The Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil Substack, and he, for many years, was the stenographer for then Vice President Joe Biden, meaning he wrote down every utterance from 2011 to 2017. Mike, great to have you back with us, sir.
Thanks, Vince, and every utterance is right. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it must have been a trip. I can't even imagine. So tell us the latest on, I know you keep digging in here. What's the latest you've discovered or can share with us about the Biden family and this company Burisma, which is really this Ukrainian energy company, which really seems to be at the center of so much of the Biden family's income and corruption?
Yes, exactly. And they had this grand jury investigation in Delaware that went nowhere. Well, my latest Substack, I got to the heart of who may have been the mole in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware. David Weiss had a U.S. Attorney's Office. He was in charge of this investigation.
Right.
It started in, I believe, 2018. Well, there was a guy working for him there named Alexander Macklar, and he was there until 2019. And he worked there with David Weiss 2016 through 2019. Before he worked for David Weiss, he worked for Joe Biden in the White House. At the same time I worked for Joe Biden. I never met him. We didn't cross paths. But what I've done is I've been digging into the Hunter Biden laptop. It was given to me by Marco Polo. They're the anti-corruption nonprofit. So I've been writing my Substack based on that. Well, there's a significant email that I've discovered and reported, and I think you and I have discussed it in the past. It took place on April 12, 2014. Well, on that same day, and this to me signifies that Joe Biden were in a conference in Wilmington.
I'm sorry. One moment. Because I think you just got interrupted. One moment. I'm sorry. Mike, because your signal's breaking up and you're reaching obviously an important point. You cite the date of April 12th, 2014. Go on from there.
Right. And so April 12th, 2014, there is a conference with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden,
and Beau Biden,
Wilmington, Delaware, and Beau Biden. Well, it now looks like this guy, Alexander Mackler, may have been there. The thing that happens is they're having this conference. Later that night, Hunter Biden puts out a long email to his colleague, Devin Archer, 22 points, how to strategize about going into Burisma. In the middle of the afternoon, though, Mackler puts out an email to Hunter Biden, Beau Biden, and Eric Schwerin about what's happening with the Ukrainian presidential elections. Later that afternoon, there's a press release that's put out by the White House. Joe Biden is going to Ukraine in 10 days, April 21st and 22nd in 2014, and he's going to be talking about, securing the presidential elections, the upcoming presidential elections.
In Ukraine.
It's 4:30 in the afternoon. That was important to Beau and Hunter and Eric Schwerin. He's just an attorney in Delaware. How do you get this information? So I'm looking at that and saying, I think he was there. I think he's the guy. He was there at the beginning of this conspiracy. And by the way, during that day, Hunter Biden and Devin Archer set up a meeting with Joe Biden, April 16th, like a few days later. Well, Devin Archer's testimony from the House Oversight Committee confirmed that Hunter was there. So they're talking about Burisma. They're emailing each other about Burisma. And Joe Biden is in the middle of it. And this guy Mackler is sitting there listening. Years later, when the investigation comes out, he's right there in the office where the investigation is taking place. He's right now currently the Deputy Attorney General of Delaware. So he's right in position to sort of look over the shoulder of legal proceedings in Delaware as they're taking place.
It's just amazing, isn't it? And so this cast of characters just keeps coming back like a boomerang. And Alexander Mackler working with David Weiss, and he's a guy who seems to be a fact witness to some of the most important elements of the Biden family's arrangements in Ukraine.
That's right. And what's significant about that email is he included Eric Schwerin in it. Eric Schwerin is set to give an interview, a sworn testimony interview to the House Oversight Committee. So if they ask him three questions, do you remember getting this email from Alexander Mackler on April 12, 2014? Why did you think he sent it to you? Was he in Wilmington with Hunter, Beau, and Joe at the time? And do you think he conspired with them to squash the investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe in 2019? Then he's under oath. He's got to nail it because he's in it now. Schwerin has got to go up there and testify. What do they say? What is the House Oversight going to get him to, come out with?
Huh. So one of the reasons you were able to find all of this is because you started searching recently for Joe Biden's pseudonym. Is that correct? You kind of were alerted to the fact that Joe Biden was using an alias, and you began digging into the emails that involved his fake email address.
Right. That's right. Because, there's been a lot of reporting all of a sudden Joe Biden's using these email aliases. One of them is robinware456@gmail.com. So I searched for that. And I searched for this a while ago. It was March 2022. And that's when this email pops up of him. It was basically Hunter sent an email to that email address. Plus, he also sent it to Jill and Hallie Biden and Beau Biden. Hey, Maisie's got a basketball game in Wilmington. Here's her schedule tomorrow. The site of the basketball game was 6 miles from Joe Biden's residence. And I think Hunter and Maisie drove up that day. They stayed at Joe's house. Hunter Biden talked to Joe through the day with the basketball. During the basketball game. Alexander Mackler probably was there. He sends his email out saying, hey, here's what we know about the upcoming election from Ted Kaufman, another Biden operative who was then in Ukraine. And then later that night, Hunter sends out this strategy email.
Well,
and in that email, he talks about what my guy will do, and my guy is Joe Biden.
It's always Joe. And when we hear from all the witnesses, the big guy, my guy, anytime the word guy appears, that's a reference almost uniformly to Joe Biden. The other piece that we heard from Devin Archer's testimony, and certainly from all of the people who know the Bidens, and even Joe Biden himself, I think, and Hunter for that matter, is that the two men, Joe and Hunter Biden, speak all the time. They call each other all day long. And what are the substance of those conversations? Obviously, it's a father and a son. They're entitled to talk if they'd like. But the reality here, the implication is that they have a lot to talk about when it comes to enriching the family.
Yeah. And it's, and this guy Mackler was very close to the family. So he knew Hunter, he knew Bo. He was working for Bo on his campaign. Bo at that time was the Attorney General of Delaware who was getting ready to run for governor. And Mackler had been his campaign manager to get him to be the Attorney General. Very close to the family.
Yeah.
So this guy was in those conversations.
He ends up on Jack Smith's team. He ends up, Bo Biden's campaign manager ends up on David Weiss's team.
That's exactly right. And, that's just the Delaware way that Joe Biden always brags about.
Yeah.
But it's just total corruption.
Total corruption. And how many of the Weiss investigators, Democrat donors? There's been all sorts of reporting to that extent. And so the whole thing is nuts. I mean, if you are a Democrat donor, you have to recuse yourself. In any normal world, you would recuse yourself from an investigation like this into the family of the President of the United States, whose party you obviously and explicitly support. And yet none of that. If you'd have to recuse yourself if you were the campaign manager for the subject's brother. That's obvious. And yet we have all these guys who are actively involved, and that appears with a purpose.
Exactly. And, he left the office in 2019, and so now we're at the stage where, the plea deal blew up in their face.
Yeah.
But he's, been in and out of the White House several times over the last couple of years. I was reading today some news reporting about he shows up in White House visitor logs going back and forth, this guy Alexander Mackler.
Yeah, and what are the chances that he's still communicating on a routine basis with people in and around the David Weiss's office? And that's probably very high. It sounds like the kind of guy who'd be a perfect go-between for those two worlds. Somebody who is no longer on the team, yet knows everybody pretty intimately.
Exactly. Yep. There's a lot going on. The House Oversight Committee can put this pressure on Eric Schwerin. That's where the truth comes out.
Yeah, it sure seems like it. I hope they listen to your advice here. Let me ask you about the Victor Shokin interview this weekend. Brian Kilmeade over at Fox aired an interview with the now fired Ukrainian prosecutor, of course, infamously so. And he said there's no doubt there were illegal activities going on with Burisma. He also said that that's the reason Hunter Biden was brought in. I played that audio earlier. I do have some additional audio here, though. Brian Kilmeade asks about Devin Archer, who said that you, Victor Shokin, were a threat to Burisma. Do you agree? Listen to this exchange.
Devin Archer said you were a threat to Burisma. Do you agree?
Да. Согласен.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Why? Because you were going to find out what they were up to?
Because he understood, and so did Vice President Biden, that had I continued to oversee the Burisma investigation, we would have found the facts about the corrupt activities that they were engaging in that included both Hunter Biden and Devin Archer and others.
What corrupt activities did you suspect they were engaged in?
It would take half a day for me to discuss every single count, but I can say that Burisma illegally produced, sold, and utilized gas. Zlochevsky, the founder of Burisma, recently made a plea deal with the prosecution in a case where he was accused of giving a $6 million bribe, which is the kind of money that you don't just give away if you're not really engaging in anything illegal. So his plea deal was to cover up a $6 million bribe that he gave earlier.
In other words, the millions flowing to the Bidens and their business partners had a purpose, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was on that trip with Joe Biden in 2015 when he went to Ukraine and threatened the Ukrainians. It was President Poroshenko, and Arseniy Yatsenyuk, the prime minister. It was December 7th, 2015. And this is weird, but today I was looking through the transcripts on the Obama WhiteHouse.gov website. It seems like they've taken that transcript of that speech, of the remarks that he did at that time, off the website. There's other transcripts there, but there's now a note in the website. The archive.gov website is working on it. So, you can't see this now today, but we're working on it. I've never seen that before. I've been in and out of this website almost every week for the last 4 years. Never seen that before until today. Very strange.
Because that was your work. You transcribed all of these words, and then that document was memorialized in this archived version of the Obama-Biden White House. You're saying you visited it today, and all of a sudden you can't find it anymore?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I can tell you a little bit about what I saw there as an eyewitness. So Biden gave a big speech in the Rada. That's RADA. That's the Hungarian Congress.
Yeah.
He gives this big speech, and he's going on about, we got to stop the corruption here. Well, he's saying that to the people who know that he's in this corrupt activity with his son. Then he walks out, and about several hours later, he walks out and does this sort of ending presentation. Yatsenyuk on one side, Poroshenko on the other, Biden in the middle. And they're doing remarks. They look very tense. I think that's after the point where he made that threat. They look very tense. He makes his remarks. We got on the plane within hours. We were on the way out as he was making those remarks. We got in the motorcade, went to the airport, and we were gone. So that's the point where he was having a meeting with them and making those remarks. That's a transcript that I don't think is there anymore. You can read the remarks, the speech that he did to the Rada, and there was a speech he did the day before. You can read that. But the remarks he made just at that point in time, I think is missing now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it looks like to me.
Would you do us a favor? I know you're constantly updating your great Substack. Is it possible, could you put up a piece that includes screenshots of what it used to look like and what it looks like now?
I think I do have the old version, but I will do that. Yes,
there are internet. You should have it in an internet archive somewhere. They should have a cached version of the website that you could pull, and in order to look at what it used to look like as of, say, last week. But
right,
that would be an interesting comparison for sure, and amazing. Oh, yeah. So you say everything else is available except for the juiciest stuff.
Yeah, and there was a phone call that Biden did with Poroshenko November 2015, so a month before he goes. And in the readout of the phone call, this is still on the website, there's a line at the end where it says, we're promising $1 million loan guarantee, but we're working with Ukraine on curbing their corruption problems, something like that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they were teeing up this. We're taking out this Poroshenko. Shokin guy. They were teeing that up for a month ahead of time.
Amazing. I'm so glad you're out there following the details, Mike. You were a frontline witness to it in the first place. Mike McCormick, author of The Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil Substack. Thanks for your time again today, sir. Coringe was on a podcast this weekend.
The president and Dr. Biden, they decided to put me in this position.
Why was Jill involved?
They decided that they wanted Karine Jean-Pierre, with all of the things, all the communities that I represent.
What communities?
Clearly being a black person, right? Being a black woman. They said,
that's a community.
We want you to represent us.
Right.
We want you to represent the White House.
Because they too are black.
We want to meet this moment that we're in. And we know that you are beyond capable of doing that.
You're right? Beyond capable of meeting this moment that we're in. What does that even mean? What moment are we in? Exactly, Coringe. Be more specific. This moment we're in, she gestures wildly. What moment? You're beyond capable? So you're saying out of a field of so many other just regular old capable White House press secretaries, they went with you. Guess you're beyond capable. The great one, Mark Levin, is ready to go. He's up next here on WMAL.